I think over the years, I've always been really shy about pushing the women-owned narrative whatsoever. I've always wanted to focus on product, but the more I'm out in the stores and I get to speak to budtenders and just women in general in the industry, I think it's important for me to, just be a good example of somebody that's worked really hard and has a great team and happens to be a woman.
Hey everyone, welcome to High Spirits. I'm Anna Ray Grabstein. It's August 11th, 2026, and today we are recording episode 148. Ben Larson is out today, but I have an amazing guest. Anna Wiley, CEO of CAM, is with us today. I am just back from a big off-grid camping and rafting trip in Idaho on the Salmon River. And oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry I wasn't with you last week, but it was so amazing. I was absolutely living out my little house on the prairie dreams, feeling like a pioneer deep in the wilderness, the Frank Church Wilderness, actually, which is one of the most remote wilderness areas in the US. I saw bald eagles and wild sheep and all kinds of incredible birds. It was so cool. That said, Idaho is a serious prohibition state. So don't go consuming any intoxicating substances in Idaho unless you're ready to really push the boundaries of the law. Uh, for a quick little news update today, there is a lot going on in cannabis, but I did pick out two stories that I think are interesting for our audience. This morning, I got the early morning text message about Curaleaf publicly announcing its intention to launch an unsolicited takeover bid for Aurora Cannabis, offering $4 per share in cash and stock, which is a roughly 45% premium, and this is after Aurora's board already refused to engage following two letters in July and June. Um, so the combined company, if Curaleaf is successful, would create a 17 country global cannabis platform. And it is a pretty wild concept. I haven't seen a takeover bid like this in cannabis before, which is why I thought it was worth mentioning today. No formal bid has been filed yet, and Curaleaf says it's open to a negotiated deal, but it's taking the offer directly to shareholders after being rebuffed by the board. So I'll be following this and we'll keep you updated. Another interesting piece of news is related to hemp. We've talked a ton over the last 18 months or so about the hemp ban and hemp policy broadly. A really interesting quote that came from Cultivated in today's newsletter from Senator Rand Paul, who said that there are a couple of industries that are opposed to hemp that also sell hemp, meaning the cannabis industry, from Senator Rand Paul. And, I think that this is really interesting because the Senate just passed a delay of 30 days to the hemp ban. And now another bill was introduced by Representative Beth Van Dyne from Texas and co sponsored by Representative Greg Landsman of Ohio. And that bill is a regulatory pathway for hemp beverage that would mirror pretty closely the way that alcohol is regulated federally with a three-tier system for beverages specifically. And I think that the reason that I wanted to pull out this Rand Paul quote and mention it specifically is because there is a lot of kind of two-sided discussions going on here. We've got MSOs that are lobbying against hemp at the federal level while also selling hemp beverages into the market. So it's a little bit confusing. But if you are following the earnings calls of public companies, most of the public cannabis companies are mentioning that closing the hemp loophole benefits their companies in some way or another, and look at it as a positive signal from the federal government. Uh, That said, hemp beverages, I think, present a very different competitive form factor to the categories that the MSOs are really winning in and are deriving a lot of business success from. So it's possible that this Beverage Regulatory Parity Act that was introduced yesterday is just the compromise that the MSOs and the hemp space might need to move forward, and an interesting way to keep access in more conventional retail channels to some type of cannabinoid um, products. So I'll be following this and we'll continue talking about it. There is lots of other news, namely, as you can imagine, Vireo continues on its acquisition roller coaster, picking up companies wherever it can, broadening its footprint in different states, and its earnings season. So, if you want to follow along with the earnings reports, there are some small wins and lots of big losses, per usual, with the public companies. But it's time for us to talk to Anna. So today, our guest is Anna Wiley. She is the founder and CEO of CAM, which stands for California Artisanal Medicine. And by the numbers, she's built one of the biggest stories in California flower that most of the industry isn't talking about loudly enough, in my opinion. CAM is the number two branded flower brand in the state right now, trailing only behind Stizzy. And by BDSA's numbers, is doing about $73 million a year in California alone at retail. And their pricing is nearly double the average California market price per gram, while still maintaining a premium value positioning. The revenue appears to be growing almost 100% year over year, comparing month over month to last July. She started in Colorado in 2009 as the first woman to open a dispensary in the state, relaunched in California in 2018, and has built CAM into one of the most successful cannabis producers in the country. And from my experience with her so far, she's also refreshingly blunt, so we're not going to be holding back today. Welcome, Anna, to the show.
Thanks, Anna Ray.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having us here.
Yes, it is so great to have you. In diving into the numbers this week, pulling up my BDSA Claude MCP, seeing what you're doing, I've been like just so impressed overall. Totally impressed with the growth, with the focus, with the way that the numbers continue to almost hold strong year over year with your pricing. I've seen that um, as the market has compressed, your pricing has stayed really stable. So I think that we should just jump right in. I want to talk about what you're doing here in California. So yeah, your number two flower brand, your pricing is nearly double the market average. Your revenue is up year over year. Um, how are you doing this? What is going on?
I think, everybody always comes on these and say, "Oh, we have the best team," right? But I really do believe we have one of the best teams, and I think what's added is we have this mix of folks that have been here since day one, with lots of what I call great hires from other companies that have done well, and we've been able to acquire these people, especially in the sales department, and be able to grow from there and build these amazing relationships with our retailers. And I think that not enough credit goes usually brands when they do well, they're like, "Well, we're the best brand, so obviously everybody wants us in the retail," but, the retail is an extension of ourselves, and so I could not be here today without my amazing, San Diego family and, just all the stores. Steezy is number 1, but we're also their number 1 third party, so I can't that same thing, Catalyst, off the charts. I mean, I can go on with the multi-store that goes on in California, and then all the moms and pops, right? Well, have something like Canna Cruz and, that do incredible numbers with us, that push our brand. I think over the years, I've always been really shy about pushing the women-owned narrative whatsoever. I've always wanted to focus on product, but the more I'm out in the stores and I get to speak to budtenders and just women in general in the industry, I think it's important for me to, just be a good example of somebody that's worked really hard and has a great team and happens to be a woman. So,
Yeah. I love that, and I've actually felt the same struggle over the years as a woman in the industry. I haven't always felt like these women's groups and women's business meetups were for me, and at the same time, I realized that I really wanna set an example to the younger women that are following behind me, and, uh, like, I've recently gotten into going to the Valkyries, the WNBA, team in San Francisco, and I realized just how badass these ladies are
Yeah.
and how getting to yeah, and, like, getting to have, role models like that when I was younger, like, maybe I would have played basketball longer because I would have seen
Mm.
people that looked like me that showed me that I could be athletic in that way. So I totally hear you, and I understand, like, why you wanna earn your spot, and you certainly have. It's not because you're a woman, you happen to be a woman, your company is certainly successful on its own.
Yeah, and the other part of it is that we have amazing men, and I've had some of the best men mentors, over the years, and I feel that like I said, it's a give and take there, of just
Yeah.
having a team and having a great balance of great men and women, so.
Yeah. Well, let's like jump into some of the deeper strategy. So, as it relates, you talked about your retailers and how important they are, and ultimately the consumers are driving the choice at the dispensary. They're buying your product, and what that looks like in terms of pricing is that the overall market in California for retail price per gram averages around $4 per unit. And then at the high end, you've got Cannabiotics, which is another premium brand, and they are closer to about $11.50 per gram. And then you're kind of solely in the middle. You guys average $7.50 per gram. You have been there for the last couple years based on the data that I could see. And I'm curious if you could just talk me through your pricing strategy and how you see premium value kind of where how do you thread the needle to land it based on the quality and the brand and everything else?
I think that we looked at this and we said to ourselves, let's, when everybody was selling $37 eighths during COVID or what the just insanity pricing there, we just kind of wanted to start somewhere in the middle where we could stay there and then build into our COGS. So I think that our plan was okay, we started off with a 500 light facility. We knew we were building a 2,000 light facility. We also knew tons of other people were building large facilities. We knew that the price would come down. I had seen it in Colorado a bit more drastically, and even after I left, we watched the price kind of plummet. So we wanted to make sure that we're growing everything, that that we're not overproducing, so we're not in a position that we have to sell a ton of bulk or we have to do these crazy deals that end up actually not helping the consumer, because then people start, cutting corners on their product and all of those things. So our pricing strategy for Ace is to still kind of hold on to that wholesale price, and then we introduce sevens and 14s. Where there is, some entry point of having some value. I know everybody hates that word. They associate it with like, Walmart or whatever it is, but there is something to be said about a consumer saying, okay, well, I bought this super, super expensive thing and it was really great, but then I bought something that was just like a little bit cheaper, but it's consistent. So our pricing strategy kind of holds with the consistency in our QC, of what does go into the jar, that it's the same every single time. I think that if you look at any kind of CPG product, I think that, it's so much easier. It's a lot easier to do with vapes. I'll tell you that much. I think, unless the hardware blows up. But with flower, it is a living, growing thing. And believe me, there's a million things that can go wrong in 121 days of a harvest cycle. And they usually do. So, just kind of keeping the consistency of product and then relating that to price. We don't think that the decrease in prices is gonna stop. I think it's a commodity. It will commoditize a little bit further. I think your $25 eighth is gonna move to a $20 eighth, wholesale bit, right? So by,
Mhm.
in another year. But I think that we're at a standstill because a lot of these brands can't live on giving 50% off. They just they haven't, they have not planned accordingly. And I think you can do it for a quarter and then pull back. But what happens usually is if somebody's used to buying something at a certain price, and then all of a sudden you bring it back and they might, now not find the value. So it's so much better to kind of stay at, you can have a deal day here and there, but stay at an everyday lower price and really build into the variety, the width, the value add of our brand ambassadors and our support for the stores and our sell through, and using that money to go back to the retailers and say, "Hey, we gave you 12 strains, 2 of them didn't sell very well. Let's make sure we get those, let's make sure we get those off the shelf." I'm not here to hide that not every strain that we is amazing, right? So,
Yeah.
it
Well,
just
so you're skirting around a little bit discounting, and, like, in
I am.
California,
Yeah.
it's a big effing deal, right? It's like everybody is doing it, consumers are addicted to it, like you said, they just start to believe that
Coffee for
we
Tito's.
always yeah, 50% off or I'm not gonna buy it, and then you talk to brands and sales folks, and everybody's kinda got a different strategy of how they wanna price. Do they wanna set their wholesale price high, and then you've got retailers that demand a certain percentage off every single invoice, or they want to do these certain deal days. But when you look at your numbers and how they're selling through at retail, it shows a story that shows that you're not doing as much discounting as the rest of the industry broadly. And I'm sure that your salespeople are getting the pressure from retailers that want you to do those discounts or that have certain ways that they think they're going to be able to create success for your brand in their stores. I'm curious of how you have responded to that, how you've coached your team to kind of figure out how to land deals or land transactions without having to cut deals always and to discount so heavily.
It's a lot easier now roaming around with, like, whether it's a BDSA report or a hoodie report or whatever, headset and saying, "Oh, hey, we're in the top 3," or whatever it is, we're the number 1 brand. Now it's easier. Back in the day, I think that we always, stated that, "Hey, whatever money that we're gonna spend the rest of it on marketing, and we're gonna really help you with sell-through." Some buyers would get it, some wouldn't, until they actually saw, the proof is in the pudding that there is sell-through on a regular basis. I think we also go in, and I always train the sales folks to talk about listening. Where are we in their store? Who else is in their store? What kind of margins are they making from, not that they'll tell you right away, but you'll eventually learn, what are the margins that some of these other top brands are offering? What can we do better in the store that they're not getting from that relationship, right? I think sometimes once folks become a top brand, they're not visiting the stores as much. They're not, on the floor as much. And I think that we're pretty nitty gritty. We're kind of I'm kind of grindy. I work 7 days a week, and I'm in my warehouses and I'm at the shops, and I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, just 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 making that relationship with each of the individual store managers and getting down to that. We have a just amazing marketing program and a marketing team that does that as well.
Talk more about that because I think that people think that you can't market in cannabis, but you're clearly doing it. A lot of people are doing it, but it's different. It's not putting an ad on television or advertising on the radio. It's a little bit more gritty. So say
And
more about the type of success that you found.
we'll do some of that. Where like Dr. Green Thumbs had something on the Super Bowl, and we happened to be a product that that was on there, and we
Cool.
had treated their staff or something like that. But we try to use marketing as a defensive play, I would say, more so than offense. We know that we can't do. I mean, now I think they've gotten rid of even things on the highway and whatnot. But in terms of billboards, what we do is we have brand ambassadors, and then we also lean into any type of event the store might be having. I think that that's like a big piece of it, and try to participate on that level. There's no other way to put it, but guerrilla marketing. It's on the ground. It's people driving hours away to all sorts of places, and we also have territory driven programming, right? What's going to work in San Diego is not going to work in NorCal, and it's probably not going to work in the IE. It's probably, every single territory is very, very different. And we have a team that kind of caters to that. And we're always listening to our sales reps. I will say that the entire company is built on supporting the sales. Uh, uh, Everything that we do is to try to make the sales team's jobs easier. If they want different strains, if they want different products, we always, hear and then we look at the market, right? How big is this market for us to go into, and what's the lift on it? But especially on the uh, strain selection side of going very, very wide, having a lot of great variety, trying to find something for everyone, and then tons and tons of feedback from an analytical standpoint to say, okay, hash burger selling, let's grow more of it. And actually grow for some of the bigger shops on what they want, right? Um, really looking at what's sitting on the shelf after 2 weeks and what went first, and then going back to cultivation and doing all of our planting scheduling around that. Uh,
How do you create that feedback loop? Because when to actually actualize that type of communication from the field into operations, especially as the company goes from where it probably, 20 people to 200 is really hard.
well, I think that I've seen it just trying to do some of the licensing stuff. I've always and as from a cultivation background, usually the cultivation team has lots of problems with the sales team. They're like, "Here we go again. They're gonna tell me that some strain is horrible, and then the cultivation team loves it." Well, I'll tell you it's this, the secret sauce of CAM or was really special is we have a head of cultivation that's really humble, and he's always talking to the sales team on his own, actually. There's a lot of communication there between, the VP of strategy and sales and, Damien versus Ryan and just kind of that, you know, just that correspondence, I think, is very, very important. We get the team together often so that they can get to know each other and they realize that, hey, you could grow the very, very best product in the world. It's commoditized. If it doesn't sell within like 29 to 34 days,
Yeah.
it's trash. So, you can grow all the best product, and of course, it's product centric, but it's really, really about the sales and making sure that we're connecting with the customer and connecting with our retailers to make that happen. So, I'm not a big meeting person. I try not to have huge meetings. I try to have very, very quick 5, 10 minute small meetings, just to kind of get to the point. Like you said, I'm blunt. There's probably no better way for for anyone to describe me. Uh, there's barely a hi and hello, and it's just let's get into it because we're wasting time. But yeah, that's what I would say is a lot more
Awesome.
communication, and then kind of gearing the whole company and the strategy towards sales.
Well, I think I want to dive a little bit into cultivation because it's a key part of what you guys do. You recently converted a former Coors bottling plant into your new Sacramento operation, and you did that through purchasing the real estate itself and developing the space. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and just your cultivation, like your operational footprint broadly?
Okay, great. So I came here in 2018 and bought a 30,000 square foot warehouse. My big thing has always been we want to try to own the buildings that we're in. Uh, It helps us plan for our financial future and our financial strategy. And so we had the 500 light facility. Everything that we've done has really come from the growth of using the money that you're making. We've had, I just only have one partner and he's on the, helping me with the real estate end, but that's also very, very helpful. I think that's been our strategy. So, uh, we then opened up a 2,000 light facility in Natomas, which is just 15 minutes away. Here's the other big thing is that we're not all over the place. Everything is within 15 to 20 minutes away from each other. I think
Mhm.
that's a big proponent of teams talking to each other, getting stuff worked out between, just the proximity. I mean, if you look at things like In and Out or any other business that does it, they really don't want to have their operational too far away, from where they're located in the state. I think that that's like a good lesson for us. That's just how we operate. Then we opened up a 2,000 light facility in 2024. Uh, I think that the main, most important thing that we've done for CAM is that we have gone all in on one brand. We had a moment where, we were like, "Oh my god, 2,500 lights, that's too much for one brand, right? We should probably make a cheap brand or a street brand or, those types of things." And I don't think any of that works. I think that if you have
Mhm.
a team that is really focused and laser focused on loving one thing and everybody's in, for one thing, it's been great for us. I'm not saying that that can't be done because I'm watching tons of people do 4 or
Yeah.
5 brands, and especially here in this area. So, um, there's a strategy for everybody. For us right now, it's really to just go all in on what we have. So then
Yep.
we have 2,500 lights. We have bought the Coors bottling, which is, I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of in dreamland because it has a lot of emotional impact of kind of, big companies. And then we are building out another 2,000 lights, that should be completed by February of this year. But our entire distribution center has been moved in there and our corporate offices are there. And then we have a Long Beach location, the Long Beach office, and that's where the big part of our sales and marketing team reside there as well.
Okay. And so as you think about these operations and how you want to manage and grow, I'm sure that you've considered distressed assets. There's been lots of cultivation for sale in California, and yet you're choosing to build it. Uh, Say more about that. Tell me what you've seen when you've looked at other cultivation, even though I didn't even ask you if you did. I know you did. So tell me
I
what you
get
saw and why
one
you
to
chose not to buy it.
it's so many. I think sometimes I'm gonna be careful on how I word this so I don't offend the world. Um, Distressed assets come with not only is the asset distressed, but the people are distressed too. So by the time you fix the asset and you fix, some of the distressed people that come with a distressed asset, you might as well have just bought or built the new shiny thing. Uh, that's always
Yeah.
been, and I hope that people see that as we grow in value for CAM, which is, our worth is the fact that we're building and it's positive and it's not everyone's very busy with distressed assets. I'm watching it, especially on the retail side. So, not much is being paid attention to the quiet operator that's quietly having, growth and kind of and also during a time where a lot of things are distressed, we're not here to, boast and be like, "Oh, look, we're doing so great," because it is a really difficult time for some of these folks that are losing their businesses, and I'm an empath on that note.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so then more on cultivation. Let's talk about
Yeah, I'm
genetics.
talking about genetics. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about genetics. I want to hear kind of you said that you have lots of strains. I know you've got some proprietary strains, some classics, like you guys are leaning into like diesels and train wrecks and cheese and kind of like old school strains, which I love. I always wanted someone to put out like a retro vintage line specifically, and
We're
seems like that's happening. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
talk about kind of how you choose genetics, how you manage genetics, even if like you're working with outside nurseries versus managing your own, pheno hunting, kind of the whole thing.
Okay, so we have a three-part, strategy on genetics. We At this time, pop very, very few seeds. It is a year and a half away. We do it very, very carefully because we don't have specifically an R&D facility. In the new facility, we have an area for R&D. We do have quarantine areas in the warehouses, but that also makes it very difficult. And let me tell you, if you're going to compromise your entire warehouse for some strain that might have hops or root aphids or mites, there's all of that and then some. And our whole thing is that we are working towards OCal certificate. We're working towards all these things and IPM and pest management is a huge part of that. And when so we're really, really careful on what we bring into it. We have 120 different strains that we keep alive. A lot of them are in stasis. We grow for seasonality. I think sativas are really fun in the summer. People are going to concerts. They want to get out. They like sativas. I think that indicas, you got to have some all year round. I'll tell your listeners or our listeners the mistake that we made recently is that we grew too many sativas for the summer and not enough indicas. So when that kind of happens, then we kind of have to go back and retrofit the schedule. Again, listening to our sales team. We do work with outside nurseries. What I will say about and just keeping all the old stuff. I'm 49 in January. I'll say that I've been growing for a very long time. So I knew it just like clothing. I knew, that
It all comes
eventually
back around. Yeah.
that do I want, you know, Jabot jeans to come? Probably not, but they will, and someone will wear 'em. And so we've kept a lot of stuff. We've kept a lot of the old OGs alive. We have folks that have kept them alive for me, just really old, like growers that are still have 2 lighters in their homes and things like that. I think that there's something to be said about keeping these really old strains. There's a lot of value because folks like you and me want to smoke sour diesel, SFE, and Trainwreck, which is, notorious for herming out, but even Acgui, Headband, all those types of things. Not only is it nostalgic, it takes you back to whenever we first smoked pot, but I think that there's a huge target audience of folks over 40, over 50 that want to buy something that they can resonate or relate to.
Yeah. I I love that you just dropped Afgui. The first farm that I ever went to in 2004 in Mendo was harvesting Afgoo, and that was the first thing I ever trimmed, so it
So
takes me right back. Huge
yeah,
buds, big as my head.
dear
Uh,
God, here goes my hat.
but yeah. Well, you brought up, pest management, you brought up hops. I'm curious about kind of some of the worst stuff that you've seen and
All of it,
faced,
all
in
of it.
cultivation. Yeah, and so how are
Well,
you dealing with it now?
so we live for scouting, and so we have people scouting. We have an entire amazing IPM from a gentleman that we acquired from Arizona. He brought an amazing IPM program, Michael, and made sure that we had these very, very specific scouting techniques where people are going into the rooms, they're filling out forms, making sure every single day that we're scouting. This kind of like allows us to not spray and flower. We use mostly 25B products. Like I said, we're working towards an OCal certification. I do believe as people kind of view, hopefully, cannabis in more of a healthy manner or a health, in the health industry. I feel that brands that are taking, Cat 4, all of those things are taking more interest in providing. Yes, it's a little more expensive, but it's a little more expensive because it's better for you. I know we're not allowed to use the word organic, but at least try to get close to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's OCal is organic. It's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
BS of
Just where we
government that won't let you use the term organic. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I work with Coastal Sun. They're the number 10 flower brand and they are OCal certified and I see them on that top list and um I think that there should be more brands
there
that
should be
that
a
are
brand.
providing that to consumers and I'm curious like since we're talking about OCal and you do grow indoor. So I think
Yeah.
it is more challenging in a controlled environment to both keep out pests and maintain organic standards. And also, there's like a massive carbon footprint and sustainability kind of issue that you're faced with those massive power bills and all of those things. I'm wondering if there are any sustainability measures that you're implementing since you're getting to build these cultivation operations from the ground up. Are you doing any cool new technology, harvesting water from air conditioners, like whatever it might be that could be reducing your footprint at all?
I think that the way we do that is we're not using rock wool, which is, harder to biodegrade. It is literally insulation. So we're only in cocoa. I think that we don't use any of the water types of activities of reclaiming water, mainly because I've seen a lot of issues come from that, and we don't have any time to waste in our market of, trying something out. Um, the difficulty of I was never people have found amazing strains to grow under LEDs. We're still in HPS. What I will say about LEDs is that you still have to use 5 times the amount of dehumidification. So by the time you have that in place, it's really not very much different from using regular HPS. We are trying to mimic the sun. Um, we have like a project that we probably won't touch for a couple years until there's some reason to touch it, but it's like a whole bunch of acres in Calusa, you know? I do love, whatever, like that those types of activities, but as a top shelf flower brand, I'm kind of a diehard for indoor and the look and the smell just of what it looks like.
Sure.
But I will tell you, they're doing a great job over there, um, at, at Coastal. Yeah, they're
Well,
doing
yeah. Oh,
yeah,
good. I'll be happy
yeah,
to hear that.
yeah.
Well, so let's move out of cultivation and talk again a little bit more about sales, marketing, and distribution because I
Sure.
think that distribution in California is also a special sauce. It's a complicated environment. We've seen brands that have gone with distributors suffer great pains when folks like Herbal went down and didn't pay their bills. It caused brands to go under. But self distribution is complex and expensive if you don't have the volume. It appears that you do have the volume, but I'd love it if you could just walk us through how CAM goes to market from cultivation to the shelf, what your distribution looks like, what your sales looks like, and anything else that you can throw in there for us.
Everything is in-house, and I definitely have been, wowed by Navis's growth, and we were never interested in working with Herbal, but we look at those types of things, and I've always said the same thing. If you don't control your distribution, you really don't control it. It's really difficult. So we kind of built it in, and you're absolutely right. The first couple years, you'd have packaging teams that can only work 3 days, and half of them would leave because they didn't have enough work or, all of those types of things. You kind of have to work into it. We have an amazing, director of distribution. She's just a rock star, Alex, but the cool thing about Alex is that it's all succession planned. That's another, secret sauce of CAM. So they start from wherever I find them and, as a lead in the packaging department, and they've had some experience, and then we just kind of build together and for her to kind of take over that entire operation of distributing 4 to 5 million bucks a month of packaged goods. So we harvest it right, 14 days in the dry room, quarantined while it's getting tested. Then it goes through that entire time. It goes through tons of QC. We have 3 different levels of QC. The last one being at the distribution level, and then everything is sorted by bud size and structure and all these types of things. And then we package. We have a lot of automation there, tons of automation, lots of. But we don't actually do the packaging with the machine. So that some of that stuff that the high price well, it also comes with some higher COGS as well because we're hand picking. I'm a big fan of if you look at how Porsches are built, the men work on the outside, the women do the inside hand stitching. Just kind of that familial operational uh, wherewithal is pretty evident when you come into CAM and look at the folks that are really handling the weed and the care that we are handling the product with. So, under 4 nugs and 8, under 15 and set right, those types of, like, rules, and so that way no one goes home and they're like, "What's this? Why is there so many buds in this?" Right? "Why did I pay this much money? I thought these were kinda gonna be bigger buds." All of that. We try to kind of make sure that the customer is going home being like, "Wow, this is better than I expected."
For
So we
sure.
do we and then we distribute everything from Sacramento, believe it or not. We have a small hub in Long Beach just as like a layover, but that's just where sales and marketing is. But everything is distributed and driven all across the state. We have like almost like 12 vans and a box truck that's going all over California. And we're in multiple territories every single day. A lot to manage. We got to
Yeah. What does the
logistics.
tech stack look like for that? Did you guys build your own? Are you working with one of the existing,
Oh, we run these
distribution tools?
in-house. Yep, yeah. I come in another world, I come from software. So,
Yeah.
I work at SAP and things like that. So I do love to try to use software. Obviously now building financial narratives is completely taken over by Claude, and my specialness is not as special. Um, but I think that we're really diving into how better every month we look at how can we do a better job at at distributing because it's not our forte. Our forte is I feel cultivation and sales, and I think distribution just gets better every single month on how do we deliver we have goals. How do we deliver in 48 hours, right? From Sacramento. It's a
Yeah.
jigsaw
So
puzzle.
so what are some of the current challenges that you're trying to figure out right now?
The current challenges that we're having is that if our cutoff is on Monday, then how do we get the product on Wednesday? How do we get our buyers to give us some orders over the weekend so that we can work through the weekend a little bit more efficiently and not, poor Alex is, has 50 million orders on Monday morning. These are just like, but I'm very hands-on, so I love being in the mix of trying to figure it out with the team.
Yeah.
And it's just some of the challenges of owning all the parts. Um, yeah, and there's been a lot of times where whatever it is, 6%, you're still gonna have to package for June. You're still gonna have to do work for Ju there's still gonna have to be some version of distribution even to give it to Nabis.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you see it in terms of the cost and, like, what's the right amount for you to be spending on sales and distribution as a percentage of your sales?
3%.
3%, and that's for
That's
distribution
for distribution. Yeah.
distribution.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's substantially less than what people are paying for Nabis, so that's definitely a competitive advantage. Um, alright, well, so multi-state and growing beyond California. Let's talk about that a little bit because you've got this real footprint, and I know that you publicly did a deal with PharmaCann. I don't know if that was a couple years back, but PharmaCann, people who listen to us know PharmaCann is no longer. But I'm sure that you've got folks knocking at your doors when you're putting a brand on the top 10 list in California, people are paying attention. So I'm wondering what you're thinking about, how you're looking at what comes after California.
We are trying to salvage our New York and Illinois situation of obviously that we had with PharmaCann. In New York, we're in 350 stores. Clearly, we have
Okay.
not found something to replace that. Speaking of Viria, I'm looking for folks that are actually cultivating, and that we can kind of partner and help them with help them get to that level of the next level of superior product together. I think that gone are the days that California brands just come in and say, "Hey, I'm gonna give you these great strains, and you're gonna give me lots of checks." I don't think
Yeah.
helpful at all for anybody, and I think a lot of these MSOs are now they have a bad taste in their mouth. They're just like, California brand. Like, we've had a terrible taste in our mouth because they do this, but there's no, like, actual beneficial of, like, coming in and selling through, and that's not to knock anybody that's done it. I think there's people that are doing it really well. What I learned, it's very, very hard to QC from across the country. It's it's fun.
Well,
It's
it's interesting because what you're talking about are these traditional licensing deals, but you certainly have the operational experience to go and build a cultivation in another market and operate like you have been in California and be able to capture the whole margin. I think that the reason why these licensing deals have failed is not only because of the challenges of someone like you being able to not do QC on some MSO's crappy mids that they're growing, but also because at some point, as prices compress, those crappy mids need to get a full margin in order to pay for themselves. And nobody wants to pay that 8, 10, fourteen
wherever it
percent
is, of course
margin,
not.
whatever it is, it just doesn't work. So,
Right.
like, so are you thinking about operating?
Ooh, I am not thinking about operating at this time. I think that we are very happy with where we are in California. We are doubling down on California. I look at you could go cobble together 10 states, and I'm still not going to get 41 million people in a state. I am very hands on and enjoy. going to my cultivation facilities. We just haven't we're still looking for the right licensing partnership. We're willing to put in financial, to maybe help build or design a grow of something. We are talking to some folks about that. But we are not ready just yet to just go and do what I did here. Buy a building, build out a facility, staff it, and operate.
Yeah.
And deal with all of the licensing and the regulations that happen in the first 2 years of a market. Everybody is racing to say, "Great, 2 years of a market." Then they read some, a little layer of, what the cultivation rules are in Minnesota, and they're like, "Wait, what? Like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
this is crazy." So, um none of that makes sense for cultivate, but that's because a lot of these folks are making rules that are going to, protect their community. It's like they wanna do it their way.
Yep.
I don't see a ton of states going to all the other states and saying, "Okay, well, this is kind of working, this is not." And that's why, and we're notorious, right? Everybody's like, "Oh, California," but, I will say some of the rollout hasn't been the best in New York. I'm not gonna go in there and, fight with folks that are from the area, right? And there's the whole social equity program, which I'm here to say, I'm not a fan of social equity programs. I do not think that they really work. I think it would be a lot easier to, hang your hat on folks that know how to run a business or are trying to run a business, and then help folks that can be helped within the social equity confines, which I think that that was the point of some incubator stuff, but I don't think any of that stuff has worked either. But this time I am cautious. And then also our strategy is we eat what we kill. So we want to make sure that we can afford to buy the building and outfit it and do all of those things and wait for the time that it's going to take without depleting all of our value and um, financial uh, success that we're having in California.
Well, so let's talk about finances then a little bit as we wrap the hour. Uh, My understanding is that there has not been much or any outside funding. No big M&A headlines. Is this like a badge of honor for you? Is it a limitation you're working around? Are you taking on debt to build these things? How do you kind of reconcile all of the money that's needed to grow, scale, and operate these things, and also keeping a nice clean balance sheet?
We could have built a 2,000 light facility in 2020 or 2021. We waited until we had the money to do it in 2023. We are happy to be a private company that's doing well. I think that we do not have debt. We are debt free. So we're excited to say that. And we are enjoying the fruits of our labor at this time because we saved and we didn't spend a lot of like I said, we had an amazing marketing team. Does my VP of marketing have visions of grandeur to have parties every day and do all this stuff and huge marketing campaigns? Absolutely, he does. I didn't do any of that stuff. We kind of did it a little more grittier and saved for these big capital expenses that come with buying $3.5 million of HVAC. I mean, that's literally what it is. So I
Mhm.
feel if you control your grows and control your distribution, you control your own destiny, and you have to get there in a way that you can uh, make sure that the folks that are giving you money, if you are gonna take debt, you have to be 110% sure that you're gonna be able to give money back to shareholders. And it's so volatile and the taxes are so high. I did not feel that I could do that and look a shareholder or look at somebody in the face and say, "Yep, yeah, go ahead. Give me 25. Give me 25 M's. I got it."
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so we've been very cautious. That might
Also
hurt me later on. I will say that. I do recognize that. So
well, so then looking forward, and generally kind of where we are today, how do you view the public MSO landscape and everything happening in the cannabis capital markets right now?
I think that there's lots of winners. I think there's a lot of folks that are doing a great job and have done. I mean, I have I applied for a bunch of licenses in Illinois as a young gal. The GTI is very, very impressive. What an impressive company. I think look at Kim beating all the boys to a public market. I think that's pretty cool. And she's also one of those folks that's not like, women or whatever. So I think that and all of it's impressive. I think that I worry about the craftness of cannabis and, with these huge companies. Um, I think that the big MSOs, the ones that are kind of exploding, is really bad for cannabis. I will say that because it takes institutional investors and they make them wanna rip out all their hair and run away. So, you know, the after effects of PharmaCann and everybody that put in, I think it was around $300 million. Believe me, they have a lot of friends and that wasn't, but what I will say about that whole thing is that there's great people inside the companies. There's still great people. So, when I come back to New York, I'll definitely be hitting up the sales team that did a great job at selling, $5 million a can, right? So,
Yeah.
still build those
Yeah.
sort of yeah.
Well, so we'll move the needle for you. I mean, you're still growing, you have a lot of ownership over the company, but if private equity comes knocking or if GTI wants to come and roll you up, like, do you have a number in mind that's the thing that's gonna send you to the Bahamas, or are you just in it for the long run?
Everybody has a number, I think. I wouldn't say it out loud here, but I think everybody has a number, but I also think that I think the number has to come with a lot of different things, right? I think at the end of the day, I really enjoy working, but if someone came around and, had a great number and said, you know, your team will have great work contracts. You'll be the CEO, but maybe not the CEO forever, but you'll be the CEO for X amount of time. And then, we'll bring in, this and that and try to repackage it and get a second shot at it. You still own some of it. I'm not against it.
Yeah. What do you think about ESOPs becoming
I'm
employee owned?
I know is a yes.
Mhm.
I have I'm not a fan at this time of ESOPs. I think that
Fair,
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
fair. Okay.
I think it's being sold as this, like, high moral ground type situation of, like, the Packers. I love football, but, like, like, "Here you go, everyone's gonna own it," and but at the end of the day, I think it's like, an easy way out for owners, I guess, maybe, in my opinion, and I haven't seen a ton of them go well, but if you can throw some at me that have gone well, I'm more than happy to study them and take a
Yeah.
second look. But boy, do people have been pushing them on me as of recent. People are
You
kinda
you you fit the exact profile that they're looking for, so that makes sense. I've been studying them myself, and I think that time will tell. I think that there's some really interesting, compelling things about it, especially in a company that's profitable and things like that. But, we are nearing the end of the hour. You've been super candid, really appreciate it. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanna talk about before last call?
I think that the next couple years in California are gonna be really hard, and I really hope that the rest of the cannabis companies that are private kind of put our nose to the ground and work with each other and not against each other. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, I think I have a question about that, because, there's been this rescheduling effort at the federal level, something that I'm excited about that I think could move the needle for California, but that's also still complex and not clear is interstate commerce. And I think it could provide an incredible opportunity for California supply. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about that.
That's exact like, okay, so here's what I will say. Everyone that's evaluating their companies today should not be saying, "Well, I applied for a DA license and now I'm gonna be global," and all of this type of stuff. I think that you should just be evaluating companies at the sole level of the numbers itself today. There could be a possibility that years down the line, we're able to send cannabis to Missouri or whatever it is from California. I would love that opportunity. And obviously, we're quietly betting on that. That's literally what we're betting on. That's why we're growing in the area that we know how to operate and grow in, because then the next step for us is being able to send it out. And then all of this licensing stuff really won't matter at all because we can just, yeah, we can just send it directly to the stores. We can do all of that type of stuff. Send it to have a little portion of DTC. Like I love the retail aspect, and it's cool to see what's going on in Georgia, where they're selling it in the pharmacies next door to Tylenol. That's interesting to me. All of those things are interesting. But if I had a choice, I would rather have it go the way of my friends in wine and spirits versus, you know, the farm.
Yep, makes sense. Well, it is time for our last call. So, Anna Wiley, what is your final message for our listeners?
Buy some can. Absolutely. Get
Solid
out
one.
yeah, go get out to a retailer, in your local area and try us out, and, we'd love any kind of feedback and constructive criticism you can give us to make us better. We love you, California.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Anna. It was great to have you here. And we'll see you around the hoop.
Thank
All right.
you so
Bye.
much.
Yeah. Thank you to our teams at Vertosa and Wolf Meyer and to our producer, Eric Rossetti. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, like, review, do all the things wherever you listen to podcasts. We're growing on YouTube. We appreciate all of you. And as always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep your spirits high. Until next time, that's the show.